All right, welcome family, man. Appreciate y'all coming through for the nice video. We had an exciting interviews with the experts featuring Dr. Rebecca Wang. Man, it was a good one. One in Serious B.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Yes, and again, right, she's an assistant teaching professor at the Penn State University, my alma mater. Go Nittany Lions, right? And again, right, we reached out to her as a faculty member over there, and she was delighted to have the conversation with us because she's very passionate about the topic of ancient Egypt, right, the ancient Egyptian language, right, the state formation. And she was like, yes, I'll absolutely have a conversation with your group, right, no cost, right, completely for free, because this is a part of what she does and this is what she loves. So absolutely.
So yeah, so y'all sit back and enjoy yourself and get the great information. We'll be doing an after show just to have y'all comments and things of that nature, man. So let's get right into it and let's hit the button. And here we go. Yeah. A well-organized lie defeats a disorganized truth every time. Woo-hoo-wee. Man, y'all already know what it is, man. It's the pseudo killers on deck. And we come to do what we got to do, and we're going to do what we got to do. We standing tall, we standing strong. Hey, pseudo killers on deck, look, we got a powerful interviews with the experts featuring Dr. Rebecca Wang. Man, y'all know what it is, man. Let me introduce the pseudo killers first. Brendan, what's good, man? What it do? What it do? What it do?
Hey, what's up? What's up, Punk? Hey, this is the day we've been waiting for, right? We've got Dr. Rebecca Wang right here. Thank you for taking the time to have the conversation with our group again, right? And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation, right? This is what we always talk about, right? We're not the experts. We want to point you to the experts, and this is like an opportunity for us to have a piece that we can actually go back to and point to these conversations and say, hey, well, if we've got questions, let's see what the experts have to say and weigh in on the topic. But absolutely, right? Glad to be here.
Brother Kent, Clark Kent, what's good, man? What it do? What it do? What it do?
What's up, man? Peace to the panel, man. Peace to Miss Rebecca Wang, Dr. Rebecca Wang. It's a pleasure to have you. I love it when we do shows like this, man. It just moves, it levels up the conversation, and we actually dealing with experts when it comes to these subjects. So, as y'all know, we've been talking about Egypt for the longest. So, it's about time we had, I think kind of to have one in this community come and speak to the people. So, man, glad to have y'all.
King Sosa, man, what's good? What it do? What it do? What it do?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Peace to everybody listening. I'm very excited to have a conversation with Dr. Rebecca Wang. It's going to be a really good show, man. I've been anticipating this conversation all week, man. And, we come, and as usual, we come to share what we know and learn what we don't know. All right,
Absolutely.
So let's get the party rolling.
Welcome, Dr. Rebecca Wang. I'll go ahead and introduce you to our listening audience. Right, Dr. Rebecca Wang, she's an assistant teaching professor at the Department of Classics and and Ancient Mediterranean Studies at the Penn State University. Right, she specializes in the diplomatic history of Egypt during the New Kingdom period, and her research investigates the diplomatic interactions of the New Kingdom Egypt with its ancient Near East counterparts. Right. In terms of the expertise she has in the ancient Egyptian writing system, right, she has experience in the various forms, right, the different writing systems, with a specialization in the hieratic script. Right. In terms of her education, she has a PhD in Egyptology from the University of Chicago, a master's in philosophy in Egyptology from the University of Cambridge, and a bachelor's degree in history from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Again, welcome to the panel. Welcome, and really thank you for joining our show. And before we get started, right, I want to ask you just tell us a little bit about yourself. And primarily, how did you become interested in the field of Egyptology?
Yeah, long story short, I actually took some general education courses in Egyptology and ancient Near Eastern history when I was in college. So that's how I actually started my career. So didn't expect to end up this way, but
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you. All right. Well, Sosa, you have the next slide in terms of the focus of the discussion. I'll go ahead and pull that back up because this helps us actually focus our conversation to make it more concise in terms of the questions and the discussion pieces.
Right.
All right, Sosa, you on mute.
First, we're going to deal with the first topic will be the modern field of Egyptology.
Mhm.
And then we're going to deal with the cultural origins of the ancient Egyptians. Then we're going to talk about ancient Egyptian state formation, ancient Egyptian writing and language, and ethnic identity of the ancient Egyptians.
All right, cool. All right, so our first area, right, the modern field of Egyptology, and the first question comes from Kent.
You're on mute.
All right. So let's get this thing started, man. All right. So the first question is, could you outline the essential academic and professional prerequisites for pursuing a career in Egyptology?
Yes, absolutely. So really, it depends on whether you want to become an Egyptologist or Egyptian archaeologist. So there are different divisions within the field of Egyptology, and no matter what you want, there are language requirements. So you have to require at least 1 year of Middle Egyptian. I think it's, of course, nowadays, if you want to have a true career in academia, you need a PhD in Egyptology from maybe around the dozens of universities in the US that offer this program. And there are many universities that offer classes in Egyptology or engineering and history on the undergraduate level. So I think it's not too late to get started. When you finish your BA, you can get a degree in history, archaeology, anthropology, any of these related fields. If you wanted to, become a dirt archaeologist, it's recommendable to get some field experience. You don't necessarily have to dig in Egypt because a lot of these skills are transferable. So in order to enhance your chance of getting into a program of Egyptology. So I think it's a good idea to get, as I did, a MA in Egyptology. So that will give you some background knowledge. So a lot of the requirements for becoming an Egyptologist, actually you can do that after you enter the program. Unlike if you wanted to pursue a career in classics, you have to get almost all the languages done before you enter the program.
That makes a lot of sense.
Cool. All right. Well, second question. This one is from Ankh. All right. So I'll go ahead and pull that one up. All right.
You're on mute, Ankh.
Okay, this next question. How does Egyptology contribute to and enhance our understanding of ancient history?
Right, I would say very significantly because ancient Egyptian civilization is so fascinating and basically captures all our imagination. And through the decipherment of ancient Egyptian language, we're able to basically read the minds of the ancient Egyptians who wrote these ancient texts, understand their religious practices, their emotions. If you dive into those private letters written by individuals, you can also learn about their worldview, religious beliefs, their governmental structure and how they interacted. What interests me the most is how they interacted with their neighbors, in different directions, the Libyans, Nubians, the Asiatics, how they, find things in common in each other, how they overcome their language barriers, cultural differences to find a way to, coexist with each other and collaborate with each other.
Yeah, we always talk about, in terms of, ancient Egypt and the fascination with ancient Egypt, sort of like you just mentioned, right? Everybody's sort of interested in that culture because, it contributed so much, right, to a Western civilization as well, right? And that's one of those ancient cultures you can go back and point to and say, hey, right, it sort of inspired what we see in the modern day. So that's one of those things that really make this conversation interesting, right?
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'll add to that because some people are wondering why I'm obsessed with ancient, like dead languages of people. I feel like in a way, I feel like I'm connected to the ancient Egyptians spiritually because, reading their literature, their writing, looking at their monuments, the art they created, I feel there's so much in common, despite our chronological and geographical, distance between us, our different worlds. A lot of the problems they struggled in life with, we experience the same things. And what they aspire to achieve, we have similar wantings in our lives. And a lot of the problems they deal with as a society, as a civilization, our modern civilizations are struggling with facing similar challenges as well. So I feel like learning history makes me as an individual feel less lonely and isolated.
Right, absolutely. The ancients have more in common with us than we tend to give them credit for. So absolutely. So yep.
All right. So
So,
the next question is Egyptology widely recognized as a scientific discipline?
Mhm.
And if so, could you elaborate on the scientific methodologies and approaches that are integral to the field?
Yes, absolutely. I would say Egyptology is definitely widely recognized as a scientific discipline. So in the past, very traditional scholars rely heavily on linguistic analysis, textual analysis, basically reading and analyzing ancient right documents, of different natures. But increasingly, there are more and more scholars utilizing new technologies, I would have to talk about archaeologists as well. They use strategic excavation of settlements to help us understand the living environments of the ancient Egyptians. They help us, their data and analysis help us date ancient artifacts, textual sources associated with those archaeological layers. They also use radiocarbon dating, thermoluminescence for, dating organic and non-organic materials, determining their source origin, where these, raw materials come from, and also what kind of residue, for example, were still contained in ancient vessels. And also bioarchaeologists, they study ancient skeletal remains. If some mummified remains were relatively well preserved, they can also analyze the DNA of these ancient human remains or animal remains. And I think a lot of amazing discoveries are, being made in recent years because of these new methods. And also, I think it becomes increasingly popular to use satellite images to discover previously unknown ancient remains. I actually have a friend, she's currently studying, she's a PhD candidate at U Chicago, and she actually interned twice at NASA. So she has been working with satellite images to identify ancient structures, in unexcavated regions of Egypt. And also her project is surveying the Fayum region, surveying the coastline of the Lake Calhoun, how it changed throughout millennia. And she's also working with other scholars in the field to survey, I guess, ancient Nile waterways, because the Nile also shifted through historical times. Not only Egyptologists, but scholars in other fields, they're also trying to identify ancient remains in regions that are difficult to excavate.
all right, cool.
Great, thank you.
All right, so let's bring up the next question. All right,
Brendan.
and that one's for. All right, go ahead.
My fault. No, that
go ahead.
that piece on the satellites was interesting because we kind of talked about certain geographical features that would actually stand out on the Nile. I guess we'll get to that later on.
Yeah, and it kind of dovetails into this question about what are some of the primary tools and techniques. I think you kind of hit on that that are employed in the field of Egyptology, and how have they evolved over time. So if you go just a little bit deeper in terms of the tools and techniques there, I think that's a really interesting piece that you're sort of discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for Egyptologists like me who work mostly with texts, pictorial, artistic records, we rely mostly on, ancient texts and textual analysis, mostly our brain. Also, I think nowadays we're exploring the potential use of AI technologies. Some linguists are trying to use AI technologies and machine learning to help analyze ancient linguistic data. So I know very little about that, but I'm very intrigued, and I would love to learn more about how to use these modern technologies, very exciting advancements, to apply them to the analysis of ancient data.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and for archaeologists, I'm sure they are they can make use of a lot more tools. So I have participated in several field excavations. So common tools used by archaeologists include traditional like their trowels and brushes, buckets, but also ground penetrating radar, total station, and also now they are using photogrammetry to generate basically visually reconstruct ancient monuments or sites because they can use this program called Metashape, software called Metashape, to stitch together 2D photos to create 3D models. And I think that is an extremely useful tool for not only illustrating our finds, but also as an educational tool for teaching students who may not have the chance to visit Egypt themselves.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, right? You're sort of describing, the modern field of Egyptology as something that's sort of like multidisciplinary, right? It has like, and that was one of my questions. Okay, is Egyptology considered archaeology? Is it considered within the field of anthropology? Like, how do you really dial in really what it is? And it seems like it may be a bit of all of these different disciplines, like focused, right?
It is a very interdisciplinary field, I would say. So I think a lot of different scholars, like friends I know, have a lot of different, very wide skill sets. And you have to, because with all these, you think everything that, could be discovered in Egypt or have already been discovered, but every year, new discoveries, exciting discoveries are being made. There are more data, artifacts to be studied, and you have to keep up with all these new developments and the advancement of technology in order to stay, grow out of date, right?
Right, absolutely.
Indeed.
Right. So let's bring up the next question here. And I think this way we are transitioning over into the cultural origins of the ancient Egyptians. And I think this one is Kent. All right.
Yep. All right. So yeah, this is a very hot topic in the subject that we talk with our audience as far as the influence of the Egyptians. Could you explain the influence of neighboring African cultures on the socio-political and cultural development of ancient Egypt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say since the very beginning, even before the formation of the pharaonic state, Egypt had been in contact with not only its immediate southern neighbor Nubia, but also other regions of Africa through the intermediary of Nubia. And also throughout Egyptian history, whenever the central government has the resources and manpower, they send out trading expeditions to this mythical country called Punt. And archaeologists, generations of archaeologists and scholars have been trying to pinpoint the precise location of this country. Some say it's somewhere, in the eastern coast of Africa, probably modern day Eritrea, Ethiopia, southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. But I would say this is probably futile to search for a pinpointed precise location. It could be, the same term could be a designation of different locations throughout Egyptian history, just like, the Europeans, medieval Europeans use India as a very broad, blanket term to refer to wherever region they can obtain spices and gold from. And also, I feel like Egypt is heavily reliant on all sorts of mineral sources, and especially gold they acquire from their southern neighbor. And a lot of quintessential Egyptian artifacts could not exist, without these imports. And also, not only goods travel, people also, travel between the Egyptian and Nubian border in ancient times. And a lot of Nubians, there are, of course, different ancient groups of Nubians. There are the Mechi Nubians who live in the eastern deserts. There are the A and C group Nubians who live mostly in Lower Nubia. And there are the Kerma Nubians who live mostly further south in Upper Nubia. And these different groups, interestingly, had rather different relationship with the Egyptians. And I would say the Mechi Nubians have the closest relationship with the Egyptians. They serve in the Egyptian army, and there are probably also a lot of cases of intermarriage between these two groups. And in the New Kingdom period, the term Mechi actually became synonymous with the term for police. And even Egyptians who serve in the police force were called, by this foreign term. And I'm sure their influence on the Egyptian language and culture, from these African cultures as well. And we must not forget the 25th dynasty, which was, founded by the Nubian pharaohs. And they, of course, kept a lot of their own cultural identities and traits, but they also adopted Egyptian culture. And they built Egyptian-style temples, incorporating Nubian features. And I find it extremely interesting that they especially promotes and revere the cults of the god Amun. And it believed that the god's primary residence is at the site of Jebel Barkal. It's a natural rocky outcrop at Jebel Barkal. And it was a sacred mountain revered by both the Egyptians and the Nubians.
Right, and that was going to be my question. Okay, I've heard of the god Amun, right? So I didn't know, is that an Egyptian god or is it a Nubian god? So sounds like you say it was revered by both population, both groups. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, actually later we have this famous Pi stela erected by the Nubian pharaoh Pi, and he mentioned during his northward journey to fight the other local Egyptian kings, he actually stops, especially at the temple of Amun in Thebes, to show his reverence for this god.
All right, cool.
Can I ask a question in terms of the like the area where they in Egypt they had the smaller people, were they Twa or were they little people? Like they considered them magical, and they were actually very small in stature.
Do you mean the dwarves or pygmies?
Yep. Yeah. I was trying to find a
I actually
politically correct way to say it.
I have a lot to say on that topic. So there are actually dwarves who are born with physical disabilities in Egypt. But I would say they're not especially discriminated against by the Egyptians. They could, if they receive enough training, education, they could serve the pharaoh and take important positions in the court. And they're actually, I think in the Old Kingdom period, there is a group statue of a dwarf together with his wife and children. And the artist who produced this piece, the group statue, actually very smartly put the dwarf in a position that he wasn't really trying to hide his disability.
He looked so small,
sitting cross-legged. Children were standing in the place where his feet are supposed to be. So I think that's a very smart and very very lovely group statue of the family. And pygmies were a group of people living in modern-day Congo region of Africa. And the Egyptians have known about this group of people from the Old Kingdom period. There is an extremely interesting letter from a 60th dynasty king called Pepi II. So he was the longest reigning king ever in human history, I think, still. He was allegedly on the Egyptian throne for over 90 years. During a time when average life expectancy was like 30, 40. So he came to the throne as a boy, obviously not interested in state administration. So he heard that, so during that period, the governors of Aswan, so the first province of Egypt in the south, they usually had Egypt's trading expeditions to the south. And one of these officials called Harkuf brought back a dancing pygmy, probably who can dance pretty well, do some sort of religious dance or entertaining dance. And baby Pepi II, the Pharaoh king, was extremely excited to hear about this news, and he wrote a very long letter to this official saying, make sure you bring to him to the capital in one piece, and to station guards right next to him when you're traveling down the Nile. Make sure he doesn't fall in the Nile River accidentally. I want to see him more than anything else you bring back. Yes, I think it's a very entertaining letter.
Very, very, very interesting.
All right. So
What are we saying about the pygmies, though, Brenda? Are we saying that they had contact with, or should I say, Equatorial Africa? They must have.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
read some sources on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
because if not directly, they must have some sort of indirect contact with these regions, because you can see all kinds of sub-Saharan exotic animals being depicted on Egyptian monuments, like giraffes, baboons, and green monkeys. And also they bring all kinds of exotic animals from Asia too, but they're obsessed with myrrh, a sort of aromatic resin produced from the tree sap of the myrrh tree. So that is why they're obsessed with the land of Punt, like the medieval Europeans are obsessed with Indian spices.
Okay.
all right. So let's bring up the next question here. And I think this one comes from, this is yours, right, Aunt?
Let's see.
Question number 6.
Okay. In what ways did the early Nile Valley inhabitants shape the fundamental aspect of ancient Egyptian culture? How did they shape that?
Yeah, I want to clarify, by early Nile Valley inhabitants, do you refer to the early, like first, second dynasty Egyptians, or?
Early, how about prior to, do you have any information on prior to those early inhabitants?
Like the pre-dynastic, times, or even prior, or pre-dynastic. I think that's a good starting point, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So in earlier periods, actually before, I would say around 5,000, or even way before the formation of Egyptian states, most humans in Egypt actually lived in the Western Desert before the area actually dried up, became arid and inhospitable.
Now, when you say Western Desert, I think someone had a question regarding the Western Desert last night. Well, what area, what geographic area does the Western Desert encompass?
So I would
Is it Libya, or is it farther, or?
I would say close to the modern string of oases in the Western Desert, also in the coastal region area, because there's some limited rainfall. I would say a lot of the actually nomadic Libyans also live in that region. But I would say in these pre-dynastic periods of Egyptian history, the Western Desert area, modern west of the Nile Valley, they are actually more like African savannas. So a lot of wildlife there, and the Egyptians led a nomadic lifestyle, basically chasing after these wild animals, because that's way before they actually adopted the practice of agriculture, which agricultural revolution happened presumably somewhere in West Asia, in modern day Israel-Palestinian area. So before they were introduced to agriculture, they rely on fishing, hunting, gathering for food. So not settle down permanently. So we actually found a lot of flint tools from the Western Desert, produced by these early human, and sometimes even seasonal huts that they live in. Also they probably started domesticating animals before they adopted agriculture. So there are also probably evidence for domestication of animals, like animal remains in the Western Desert. So after the Western Desert dried up and became more desert-like, they started moving towards the Nile Valley. And earlier Nile Valley environment is quite different from what we see nowadays. So it was much more marshy, like the Delta area. And honestly, not very pleasant for human habitation. You imagine the nets of mosquitoes and dangerous hippos and crocodiles, right, lurking in the waters. So there's no advantage living in those areas if you don't want to have a settled sedentary lifestyle. So it's really after they adopted agriculture, and after the drying up of the Western Desert, that the majority of them start moving towards the Nile Valley and some in the Delta area, and start settling down, and became heavily influenced, I would say, by the natural environment of the Nile Valley. And the worldview of the Egyptians, especially their early belief system, I would say, are heavily influenced by the natural environment of the Nile. I think it's obvious that a lot of the Egyptian gods have a hybrid form or full animal form. So a lot of these are actually inspired by the wide range of life they see in the natural environment, the marshy environment. And also the annual flooding of the Nile had a huge impact on their view. I think they see the life as a continuous cycle, this cycle of life and death. This view is actually very unique to the ancient Egyptians. And also, I believe the Nile as a waterway, a highway that connected Upper and Lower Egypt, ensure that these early urban centers did not delve into, I would say, independent city-states like what happened in Mesopotamia or Greece. I think from very early on, I think Egypt, once the first territorial state was established, this became the norm in Egypt. While in Mesopotamia, in Greece, norm was, there's a lot of infighting between those city-states, but uniformed states was the norm in Egypt instead of the other way.
Right. Question about those populations that were in the Western Desert, right? Did they have, was it just smaller pockets of population groups in the Western Desert, or was it something homogenous with there that sort of moved into a single area on the Nile? How were those early population groups sort of positioned in the Western Desert? If you can elaborate just a bit.
Yeah, I think I would say most of them are probably small communities dispersed all over the Eastern Desert, because before the practice of domestication, you don't have a concentration of food sources in one location. You have to basically migrate along with these animals you wanted to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stay in one place, you're going to exhaust the natural resources pretty quickly. And during that period, there's no evidence for large storage facilities. Not like after you have start practicing agriculture, you can have agriculture surplus. You also need to have collaboration between different communities for building agricultural facilities like canals, irrigation basins. There's more collaboration, I guess, among agricultural communities, but with hunter-gatherers, you're essentially competing with other groups.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thanks. Good. Let's bring up the next question, and this one is from Sosa.
Yeah, how were gender roles defined and structured in ancient Egypt, and what impact did they have on society's daily life and governance?
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. I would say compared to a lot of neighboring societies, women in Egypt enjoy a lot more independence and economic freedom, I would say, because they are allowed to own, dispose of, and manage property on behalf of their husband and also on their own. And they have a lot of legal rights. They can go to court. They can initiate divorce. They can testify as witnesses. I mean, it's not encouraged, but they do have that right if they want to. While in other societies, especially in late Greek societies, respectable elite women could not even leave the household without a male escort. That is definitely not the case for Egyptian women. They're allowed to, lower class Egyptian women, they can participate in agricultural work. They can sell goods that they produced at home and set a booth on the riverbank to sell, let's say, sandals they weaved at home, or a cloth they produced. They can also middle level or higher level Egyptian women, they can take up professions like dancers, musicians in temple cults. They can also probably serve as ladies in waiting for royal women at the courts, and probably support their husband's career in that way. And I would say royal women in particular, they enjoy the kind of freedom really, I would say, envied by their counterparts in other civilizations. They can own large tracts of land. They can employ male administrators to take care of their businesses. They can have a lot of power in politics and sometimes even diplomacy. They can exchange gifts with foreign kings. Their names are acquired about in diplomatic letters. And queen mothers are, if she has a good relationship with her son, could be hugely influential in politics and on the international stage. And during the Amarna period, a foreign king, a great king, actually wrote to the queen mother T to basically beg her to intervene because he was having a hard time getting promised gifts from her son, the pharaoh. So she's basically it was mentioned in the letter that her husband did not hide any secrets from her, and she knows everything, all the state negotiation that was going on between royal courts.
All right. That's a really interesting one there. All right. So the next question is for me. All right. And this sort of goes to the idea, right? We see the modern day Egyptians, right, that are positioned there today, and a lot of the questions that we get, or the conversations that we have within our community, is like, okay, well, how deeply connected are the modern Egyptians to the ancients, right? And in terms of this question, right, are there any discernible or recognizable remnants of the ancient Egyptian cultural practices or beliefs present in the modern Egyptian society?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think the first thing that comes to mind would be the Coptic language, right? It's essentially one of the last phases of Egyptian language, though it was basically written with Greek alphabet and some demotic signs, but it's probably not spoken by many people nowadays. It's mostly used for church liturgies in the Coptic church, but still it preserves a lot of Egyptian grammar and vocabulary and allowed us to have a better understanding of how the ancient Egyptian language works. And also, I would say the Egyptians nowadays still, a lot of their social societal values like respect for the elderly is still basically heavily influenced by ancient Egyptian beliefs and practices. And if you read the ancient Egyptian wisdom texts or instructions, so basically they're sort of advice offered by wise old men to young Egyptians. A lot of them really resonates with a lot of modern Egyptian beliefs. Also resonate, I guess, a lot with Chinese social norms and beliefs. And also the Egyptians nowadays, I think they celebrate also the beginning of the spring. That festival is also has ancient Egyptian roots. I would say also they also use a lot of amulets, for protection, and think that is also has discernible Egyptian roots. Also, a lot
Interesting.
of words in modern, though most of them, of course, speak Egyptian Arabic, and some words are also inherited from a lot of actually English words are also inherited from ancient Egyptian, like the word for ebony,
Mhm.
Egyptian word, and also the city name Aswan actually derived from the ancient Egyptian word Suenet for trade, referring to the role of the city as a trading hub. Basically, it was a border town between Egypt and Nubia, so it really served as a trading central hub for thousands of years.
All right, cool. All right, so that's
So Brendan, hold
okay. Go
real
ahead.
quick.
Yep.
So are we saying that fundamentally the population is there now? Would that be an extension of the ancient population, just maybe changing ethnicities? Could we say that biologically, or is that a whole nother? We hear a lot of people saying the ancient Egyptian population was totally displaced and went either south or somewhere. But we hear this all the time. I want to know, do you have any working knowledge on that?
I feel like I've read some studies on this because starting from the first millennium BC, Egypt has been repeatedly invaded by foreign powers.
Mhm.
Like the Babylonians tried, the Neo-Assyrians managed to do that, the Persians invaded Egypt, the Nubians and the Libyans in the third intermediate period and late period. So all these foreign powers tried to establish control, and also later Greek and Roman population also migrate to Egypt and settle down, and intermarriage is between different ethnic groups. It was very, very common. And sometimes people, especially during the Ptolemaic periods, a lot of people have both a Greek name and Egyptian name, and a Greek parent and an Egyptian parent. That is very common. And later on, of course, with the Arabic domination over Egypt, a lot of people of foreign descent moved there. And I would say modern Egyptians were the descendants of all these different ethnic groups. So I'm sure, if you do a DNA analysis, you would find, probably people of Egyptian, Nubian, descent, probably with some mix of, Greek or Roman DNA in there.
Right,
That's
cool.
fair.
All right.
Mhm.
So we transition to the next major topic section, and this is the ancient Egyptian state formation. I think this is sort of your area of expertise and area of interest as well, right? In terms of ancient Egyptian state formation. So
I wouldn't say like state formation, but I would
Mhm.
say states interaction between different states.
Okay, all right, cool. And the first question is from Kent. So I'll go ahead and give it over to Kent.
All right. So
Yep.
considering Egypt's geographical position as a nexus between continents, how did these cross-cultural interactions shape the formation and development of ancient Egyptian state?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say Egypt really sitting at a corner of the African continent, serving as a land bridge between Africa and the ancient Near East and further places. It's been like that since the beginning of Egyptian history, and the relationship between Egyptians and other groups really, I think it's hugely important for their the formation of their identity, their cultural identity, religious identity, and also their relationship with these people also a lot of times had direct impact on their internal politics. Whenever possible, Egypt tried to establish direct control over its southern neighbor, Lower Nubia. And I think it never made a serious attempt to do that in Syro-Palestinian region for whatever reason. To the west, the Libyans had a complicated relationship with the Egyptians. They conduct trade with each other, but a lot of times they are perceived as hostile groups by the Egyptians. And to the eastern desert, also nomadic groups living there, sometimes posing threats to mining expeditions sent to the eastern desert by the Egyptians. So from the very beginning of Egyptian history, they have this notion of us versus them. I think this is the same for not only the Egyptians, but also for other, I guess, early humans. The formation of their identity is inseparable from distinguishing them from, the others. And the early Egyptian state, I think, especially the elites and royals, they enriched themselves, concentrated economic sources and in their hands by trading with all these foreign peoples and cultures, and by tapping into these foreign trade network, they're able to, I guess, increase their riches, but also expand their political power. And I believe it was trading connections with these, especially the Nubians, that allow the Egyptians was instrumental, I would say, in the unification of Egypt. And yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned like the whole idea of the us versus them, I guess approach. Could you consider that like a form of nationalism within Egypt, or is that going too far? And that was one of the questions that I had that came from someone in our community as well. It's like, okay, well, did Egypt express or practice some form of nationalism?
I would say to a certain extent, yes. The Egyptians has been they've been criticized by some modern scholars for being a little bit xenophobic.
Mm.
But I would say that is going probably too far. The Egyptians
Mm.
definitely, distinguish themselves from their neighbors, but they're also their understanding of ethnic groups or culture might be slightly different from our modern, more extreme views.
Mhm.
I think their understanding of being Egyptian is more fluid and flexible. So even if you're of different ethnic backgrounds, if you migrate to Egypt, you embrace their cultural practices, convert to Egyptian religious beliefs, and you marry an Egyptian, adopt an Egyptian name, you'll be considered a proper Egyptian.
Oh, cool. And we have a lot of conversations about that, right? It's like, what goes into the mix of a person being Egyptian? What makes an Egyptian an Egyptian? Is it the language, right? Is it the food, right? And I think you sort of cleared up some of the confusion there.
Yeah, I
Like,
think they
right.
have a
No, go ahead. I want to go ahead.
I think they also have a lot of different ways of differentiating. I think they divide different groups not using just skin color. I think they also see their land as different from the surrounding areas. They call their homeland like Egypt the Black Land because of the fertile soil brought by the fertile water of the Nile, and surrounding countries though. So they built most of their settlements on these more or less flat floodplain. So they view their land as flat. And surrounding countries, especially the Palestinian region, the South Palestinian region, are more mountainous. And the deserts to the east and west of the Nile Valley, they're distinguished by the yellow reddish color. So those surrounding regions are called mountain regions, and the red land, the desert area. So that's how they see the difference between their land and other people. And also, I think funerary practices and beliefs also play a huge role in their self-identity. And I really like this passage from the Middle Kingdom story of Sinue, the story of Sinue. And he was an Egyptian high official who basically exiled himself abroad because when he was accompanying this crown prince on a campaign in the Libyan desert, he received news from the palace that the king was assassinated. And though he had nothing to do with it, he claimed to be 100% innocent. He feared that because of power struggle, probably among different princesses, there might be some bloodshed in the palace. So he abandoned the general, the crown prince, abandoned the whole Egyptian army and fled to the Syro-Palestinian region. He was accepted by the locals, actually a local chief, recognizing him as an Egyptian, married his daughter to him. So he lived a comfortable life abroad. He started to age. But by the end of his life, even if he had a family abroad, he had children, probably grandchildren, he started to become homesick. He wanted to come back because as he reached the end of his journey, he feared that he might be buried in the foreign land in these Asiatic burial style. And the king actually gave him a royal pardon, saying, come home. I totally understand. You did nothing wrong. And, when you die, you wanted to, be provided with proper mummification ritual, burial goods in Egyptian style. You will have, dancers perform and priests performing rituals for you. Asiatics will not, bury you in like sheepskin. I really like this mention. So they're not basically referring to any like, skin color or anything like that, but they're referring to their different burial practices. That's, distinguish them from the Egyptians.
Right, cool.
So I heard that. I enjoyed those answers, but there's going to be some pushback in the community. The nationalism part. So when I think of nationalism, like I'm an American, we go to the Olympics, China, Russia, we all compete in America. So is it that type of vigor for nationalism in Egypt?
I would say the Egyptians are definitely very proud of themselves,
Right.
their own
Okay.
culture, and they definitely sometimes intentionally or unintentionally display this kind of arrogancy or they did, especially on the international stage when they're dealing with other people and kings, could act in a more less condescending manner because they do see themselves as the center of the world. I think a lot of ancient people actually, did seen their worlds as and their cultural norms as the standards, as the most orthodox form. The Egyptians are not innocent in that sense. I would say they're they also viewed their world as the center of the world, and so did the Mesopotamians. So I would say there's nothing wrong in that.
Okay, I like that.
Cool. Cool. All right.
And one more, Brendan, before we move forward. You talked about skin color. So how important was skin color to the Egyptians? Was it racialized? What we know they skin color, but was it like how important was that to distinguishing themselves as an Egyptian?
I would say it's definitely a factor, a consideration, but not the most dominant factor because a lot of Nubians, Egyptianized Nubians living in Egypt, when they're portrayed themselves on their funerary papyri or monuments, they're definitely not trying to hide their skin color. They're very proud of their own identity. And also a lot of foreign rulers, especially the Nubian rulers, I think they did not abandon their original name. They kept their original name. And they weren't trying to hide their origins in their wall inscriptions either. And sometimes I find it really interesting that in some of their inscriptions, they really derive a lot of pride for respecting Egyptian cultural traditions. And sometimes I would say they project an attitude that they seem to suggest that the Egyptians are not, devoted and religious as they should be in a way.
Interesting.
All right. So let's go to the next question. And I think this one's for you, Ankh.
Okay, could you discuss the role of religion in the governance and social organization of the ancient Egyptian state?
Yeah, I would say religion is basically permeates every aspect of Egyptian life. And Pharaoh is a both head of the state and a figurehead in Egyptian religion. So he is viewed as a intermediary between the divine and the mundane realms. So basically as a messenger between the gods and the Egyptian people. And this notion of divine kingship is also very influential. Pharaoh, or the office of king, is seen as divine. So also each pharaoh, after they pass, will become a god, deified. Some pharaohs, like Ramses II and Hotep III, they actually try to deify themselves when they're still alive. They start adopting divine attributes, on their monuments, even if they're not, a god yet. So actually, there's this saying, "becoming a god," as a way to say that a pharaoh has passed away. But some people couldn't wait till they're dead.
They want to jump the gun a little bit, right?
Jump
It's
the
like
gun.
who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't want to be the god, right? Earlier.
So, okay, so and all right, now we hear this a lot about the Egyptians wasn't religious. I know I fight back on that. How do you feel? Because they say that's their culture. They not religious, and we all know what religious is. So I'm gonna ask you, based off your study, would you consider, would the information consider them to be religious or not?
I would say almost every Egyptian will be religious, but I would say not in the way that I thought, because the relationship between mortals and the gods in ancient Egypt, also in Mesopotamia, are rather different than a lot of people think nowadays, because in a lot of modern monotheistic religion, the gods were the super, the gods were, there's only one God and he's all wise, all knowing, all seeing, and moral. But in ancient Egypt, the relationship between gods and human, I would say, is reciprocal. So of course, mortals respect gods. They bring the gods and goddesses offerings, build them temples as their residences. And the kings, after a victorious campaign, would donate large amounts of booty to temple treasury to seek divine protection and blessing. But the gods are also expected to do their job and to give their protection, and they're supposed to manifest their power. Like Ramses II during the famous Battle of Kadesh, according to him at least, he was because he was young and reckless, he was actually ambushed by the Hittites, his enemies. And in this darkest hour, as the Egyptian army was about to be routed by these enemies, he, according to him, of course, prayed to his god Amun. And during this darkest hour, Amun led him out of this dire situation, and he showed his power, showed his favor towards him. So it is, I would say, the Egyptians had a rather pragmatic attitude towards their gods. And this is, I think, also the same in Mesopotamia. You can see also in some mythological texts, humans also use their, I guess, power as leverage to basically blackmail the gods. Sometimes you see the gods sending down, divine punishment, like all sorts of natural disasters, and the humans would, I guess, of course, they're in most cases, powerless in such situations, but they will threaten the gods by saying, if you killed off all the human beings, there will be no one around to take care of your cult, no one to bring your offerings and water. You will also suffer in a way.
Yeah. Speaking of religious practices, right? There's a religious practice that we had internally within our group. We had some debates around did this occur or not. This it surrounds the idea of the retainer sacrifice. And I've read in terms of with articles, they say early on in the very say the Old Kingdom or some around that time that they had a practice of retainer sacrifice. Could you sort of elaborate on that particular element, right? Did it occur, right? Its significance, and just kind of tell us a little bit.
So that probably happened during the early dynastic period, first dynasty. So
Okay.
in royal tombs at Abydos, super important site, the center of worship for the god Osiris. The first and second, some of the second dynasty kings were buried there. And around the main burial structure of these early kings, there are smaller tombs that contain so-called retainer burials. And it was believed that the Egyptians probably did practice human sacrifice for a very short period of time, but this practice was quickly abandoned, probably in the second dynasty or later than that. And they replaced these human sacrifice with servant statues or depictions of servants bringing them offerings in their funerary chapels. And in a way, it's not a great use of your sources. And Mesopotamians also practice human sacrifice. There's evidence for that in the Royal Cemetery. There's the so-called Great Death Pit discovered by Leonard Woolley. But I would say these are attested in both Mesopotamian and Egyptian societies, but they're not popular at all.
All right, cool.
Would that kind of tie them? Okay, real fast. Would that? We know the Nubians continue to practice retainer sacrifices. So would this be like a meeting point? Would this be like a practice shared by both groups, and then you can start to see the separation?
I'm not sure about the practice of human sacrifice in very early periods Nubian tombs. I know that in some of the second intermediate period tumulus burials, you see a lot of skeletons, probably of servants or in the tumulus royal tombs at Kerma. But I think that's maybe a few hundred years, apart.
Okay.
The early dynastic period. So I'm not sure if the Nubians developed this practice independently or are they under some sort of Egyptian influence. But I think a lot of societies could have developed these kind of human sacrifice practice independently. So I don't see any direct connection between those retainer burials at Abydos and those at Kerma. But we might discover other evidence in the future that proved me wrong. So.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right, that's a good one. Let's see. Next question is for Sosa. Let me pull it up here. All right.
How does social stratification emerge and evolve within ancient Egyptian society, and what factors contributed to its rise and continuation?
Yeah, this is a very complicated question. I'll try my best to answer. I would say social stratification probably started as the Egyptians shift from a hunter-gathering lifestyle to agricultural lifestyle, because with the production of agricultural surplus, there's accumulation of wealth that also enable some agricultural laborers to be freed and adopt other occupations. That leads to the division of labor and stratification of society, and also land ownership, I think, is also a major factor. So states and temples in ancient Egyptian society, they tend to be the biggest landowner. We have administrative documents, the Great Harris Papyrus, documenting the different, land ownership in Egypt during a period in the New Kingdom period. And there are also, I guess, occupation could also play a role. And in ancient monarchical societies, I guess, access to the king means access to power, wealth, influence. And a lot of offices were, I guess, monopolized by elite families, that they actually pass these offices within the family from generation to generation. I mean, ideally, the king will have to formally acknowledge these appointments, but sometimes it became just, inherited position. And the Egyptian officials also can acquire income from holding state offices, and they can also benefit from serving in the mortuary cults of kings or temples. A lot of them actually serve as part-time priests because it took probably over 1,000 years for a professional priesthood to develop. So in earlier period of Egyptian history, most of them are part-time, took priestly position as part-time jobs as a way to acquire extra income, actually. And I would say also stratification of society could come from whether you have access to education. Receiving education in Egyptian society is a way to climb up the social ladder if you're from like a lower social class. And if you manage to get enough scribe education, that means you can hold administrative positions in the government. Your descendants could receive better education and have, hope to, further go up the social ladder. What else? I think marriage might be also an option. Yeah, for especially for women, these opportunities will be valuable. But also, men could marry into the royal family by securing the hands of an Egyptian princess, and sometimes they use this as a way to legitimize their claim to the throne, coming from non-royal backgrounds.
Yeah. How was education made available within ancient Egypt? Was it something like, okay, well, you have to have wealth, and the families would have to pay to take the kids to school, or how was that structured?
I guess the way to receive education will be different for elite classes and lower level Egyptians. Most Egyptians would not be literate. I think maybe some positive estimates would say that 1 out of 1,000 Egyptian will be partially literate or functional literate, meaning they can probably read, write, sign their names. A lot of them, the scribes are actually coming from scribal families. So this kind of skill or knowledge guarded within the family. And boys from a young age will receive some sort of education from their parents, especially fathers or male relatives who know how to read and write. And sometimes if girls happen to be around, they might actually see what their brothers are doing and pick up a few words as well. And we do have limited evidence for female literacy and from Egypt. Not a lot, but some very intriguing evidence. And the elite class, they probably have better trained tutors, professional tutors to educate them. We know males, royal princesses, they have their own tutors. So it's not exactly sure what they're learning from these tutors, but presumably reading or military skills, social etiquette, that sort of things. And they could also receive, I guess, elite kids could also receive military education.
Okay. Well, that entire sort of, things, everything you just described, sort of, it dovetails into the next section, right? So the next section is about the ancient Egyptian writing and language systems, right? And the next question is for me, and let's see here. It says, could you outline the developmental stages and key evolutionary changes in the Egyptian writing system throughout ancient history, right? This is sort of, reminiscent of that early, that the conversation we had about a week ago, and you said that there was different forms of writing within ancient Egypt, and those sort of emerged during different times. So could you sort of discuss that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, there are 5 phases of Egyptian language because they have different grammar, sometimes even vocabulary. So starting from Old Egyptian to Middle Egyptian to Late Egyptian and Demotic and Coptic. And these languages are actually written with different scripts. And I guess the one we're most familiar with is, of course, hieroglyphs. It is reserved mostly for monumental inscription on temple walls or tomb structures because the nature of the writing surface. And the more cursive form of writing called hieratic developed from hieroglyphs. Sometimes you can still recognize, because it's still largely pictorial, you can recognize a lot of these signs and connect directly them with their predecessors in hieroglyphs. But they're used mostly for everyday writing, for administrative documents, for private letters, and it's much faster to read and and a lot of Egyptian scribes, I would say most Egyptian scribes, would start their training with this kind of script instead of hieroglyphs, because not every one of them get to, carve or write inscriptions on these monuments. Most of them probably do not need the knowledge of hieroglyphs. They're, more, if they're, sufficiently trained in hieratic, that will secure them a position in the administration or in temple administration.
Was hieratic actually used during the Old Kingdom? You talk about the Old Kingdom Egyptian in the middle. Okay, so it was a form of writing very early on, right? In parallel with the Old and Middle. Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah. So Old Egyptian, I would say it was primarily used in the Old Kingdom period, and the famous pyramid text collects of religious, spells, recitations and magical spells inscribed on the walls of Old Kingdom pyramids. They were written in the language Old Egyptian, and it basically fell out of use after the Old Kingdom period, while Middle Egyptian developed around the Middle Kingdom period of Egyptian history, but it was regarded as this classical phase of Egyptian language. And even in much later periods of Egyptian history, scribes, very highly trained scribes, still try to compose literature using Middle Egyptian. They try, sometimes with more success, sometimes with less success, but they regard this language as the classical phase of Egyptian language, and it's the most prestigious, I guess, language.
Right.
And even if their everyday language, the language that they use might be in Late Egyptian, they still, the ability to acquire knowledge of Middle Egyptian is valuable.
Okay. In terms of your studies, right, did you get training in all those different areas? And could you kind of describe, in terms of your level of expertise or exposure to those?
I would say Middle Egyptian is required for all Egyptology students, whether you're an Egyptian, you want to deal with texts, or whether you're an Egyptian archaeologist. You have to have at least one, I think preferably 2 years of Middle Egyptian. And also, of course, hieroglyphs. And then if you wanted to become an Egyptologist, you will have to choose another phase of Egyptian language to specialize on. So in my case, I chose Late Egyptian. So I think overall I took 3 years of courses, around 3 years of courses in late Egyptian, and a lot of late Egyptian documents or texts are written in hieratic. So you also have to be introduced to this new system of writing. And you also have to, in Chicago at least, we require every Egyptology student to learn all phases of Egyptian language. So that will include Demotic and Coptic. So Demotic, the word, it has the same etymology as democracy. So it literally, it means language of the people. So it refers to both the face of the language, and it's also the name of the script of that language. So it's actually one of the languages on the famous Rosetta Stone. And so there are like 3 different languages and scripts on that stone, which is the key to the decipherment of ancient Egyptian language. So the first section, the topmost section, is inscribed with hieroglyphs. And then second, the middle section, I think, is inscribed with Demotic. And the lower section is inscribed with Greek. And the knowledge of Greek is never lost. I mean, so immediately when the monument was found by the French soldiers of Napoleon, the local officers recognized the importance of this trilingual document. And the French scholars immediately, of course, start to try to decipher this ancient language, and they manage actually to do that.
Awesome. All right, cool. And
Yeah,
the
so we hear my fault. I didn't
Nope, go ahead.
we,
I'm sorry.
we
Yeah.
always hear that Egyptologists can't read the hieroglyphics or the meta-nature. They don't understand that. And so it's good to hear that you're actually trained in that area. And specifically when you deal with Chicago, you had to get 6 years of that. That's very interesting. So okay. All right.
Yeah, so actually, language is, we place a lot of emphasis on language because it allows you to deal directly with these primary sources. You don't have to rely on, because a lot of Egyptian texts are later preserved in Greek sources, but all of them are in more or less corrupt form. So you can, directly engage with these ancient sources yourself and understand the development of the language and vocabulary and grammar over times, which is great. Because I like late Egyptian partly because it was widely used during the New Kingdom period and imperial age, and there are a lot of foreign loan words in late Egyptian. So this phase of the language, serve as testimony of the intensity of a cultural exchange between Egypt and its neighboring civilizations. And they develop, ways to represent these foreign words, like how we try to develop a lot of new words in Chinese to represent English words. So I think that's a fascinating phenomenon.
Well, real fast, why did you call the New Kingdom the Imperial Age?
Because Egypt during that period established an empire in the Syro-Palestinian region. They basically impose their control over that region, start collecting taxes and tribute from local city-state rulers. They also managed to, I guess, establish permanent control over Lower Nubia, and they forced the Nubians to also pay their tribute. The leaders send their sons to the Egyptian court to be educated, and many of them actually return to either their home country to take the throne, their father's throne, when it's time. It's a way to, I guess, strengthen Egyptian control over these foreign regions.
Okay.
All right, cool. Next question is for Kent. I'll pass this over.
All right. So, can you provide a detailed overview of the different writing scripts used in ancient Egypt, highlighting their distinctive features and context of use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this related to the last question. So I would say the earliest script, hieroglyphs, is used, I guess, throughout Egyptian history. You find them mostly on the walls of tombs and divine temples, mortuary temples. They are, because of their, I guess, pictorial nature, they are most appropriate for being inscribed on these large stone monuments. I actually just bought this with a micro grant I get. So I wanted to build a teaching collection so you can see more cursive scripts would not have the same kind of effect on, these kind of monuments, right? But
Mhm.
we
The
think that-
beetle, right?
yes, that's a scarab beetle.
Mhm.
And the distinctive Egyptian, I guess, nature of these writing makes it clear of the Egyptian origin, of this language and this script. And the Egyptians actually sent out a lot of diplomatic gifts to foreign rulers inscribed with hieroglyphs. Even if these foreign recipients didn't understand hieroglyphs, which is probably true, they could still recognize immediately, oh, this object is of Egyptian origin, because in other cultures they use the diplomatic language of New Kingdom periods or late Bronze Age is written with a cuneiform script on clay tablets. So very different media, different scripts, different language. So that makes the Egyptians stand out from their neighbors. And the other, I guess, late hieratic script is more cursive, so it's more used for everyday purposes, administration, etc. But it was still, I guess, less accessible to the ordinary Egyptians compared to Demotic, because Demotic script is even more simplified than more abstract than hieratic. So it's, I guess, easier, more to learn for a lot of Egyptians. And the Coptic script, which was used mostly after the introduction of Christianity to Egypt, using the Greek letters alphabet to write the Egyptian language makes it the language more accessible to the growing population of Christians in Egypt. I think it's similar actually to writing Chinese with pinyin system, right? So
good.
because there are imagine there are how many signs there are in Egyptian. It's been estimated that the Chinese language has probably around 5,000 characters, though the most commonly used characters probably range between 1,000 to 2,000. But it takes a lot more time to learn than those 26 English letters, right?
Right.
All right. Let's see.
Yeah, that would be real difficult. You got 5,000 different characters.
All right.
Yeah,
So
I don't know most of these. I probably, yeah.
all right. So I think this next question is yours, huh?
How does your expertise in multiple ancient Egyptian writing system enrich your research and interpretation of data within the field of Egyptology?
Yeah, I am really appreciative of the language training I got from Chicago, because they allow me to engage directly with the firsthand materials. I don't have to rely on the translation works of other scholars, because with all due respect, a lot of early scholars, limited by their time and the education they receive, the quality of their work were admirable, given during their time, but a lot of them became outdated now and need to be updated. And if you are able to engage with the text yourself, you can actually assess the works of these early scholars, find a way to update them, and also it allows you to trace the development of the Egyptian language, the expanding vocabulary, and that also shows their cultural contact with the wider world, which is absolutely fascinating. I've been trying to read more on the kind of loan words in Egyptian during the New Kingdom period. Still trying to find the time to do that, but I feel like being a historian is very, very important, that you deal directly with sources instead of relying on secondary sources,
Primaries.
others, because if you don't know the original sources, you could be misled by their own mistakes, right? The other scholars' mistakes.
How fluid is the you would say the reinterpretation of the language you're sort of describing, right? How often are there like tons of scholars that are sort of working in that regard, and it's constantly being updated and changed? How do those changes actually hit the field? How are they vetted amongst the experts within Egyptology? So because I think that's a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very complicated topic. And I think our modern understanding of the ancient Egyptian grammar system is pretty relatively well, I would say. But still, there are a lot of debated topics and issues. And I think in recent years, a lot of new interpretations of how the Egyptian grammar system should work has been proposed. And I think Chicago is on, I guess, still insists on more traditional interpretations of the Egyptian grammar. But even if I'm trained in that traditional system, I think it's very important to keep up with all the new hypotheses, even though they are, I guess, less widely accepted, because otherwise, I think it's very important to keep up with all these new suggestions as a scholar, because your ideas or your own interpretations are of course influenced by your educational background, but as you mature as a scholar, you might develop your own interpretations that is against the education that you receive. So I think it's good idea to be open-minded as a scholar.
Absolutely.
Brendan, don't that fall right into the translation of the Kim?
Yeah, we actually have a slide on that, right? That
Okay,
we'll
so let me
that
get
we'll
out of
get
that for a
into it,
minute.
right?
Okay,
So
all
yeah,
right.
but the next question is for Sosa. And let's pull his up. All right.
What are the most indispensable dictionaries and online tools currently in use for Egyptology research, and how they transform the field?
Yeah, I would say for each phase of Egyptian language, or even for different scripts, there are multiple dictionaries and reference tools. So it's almost impossible to list them all here. But if you're interested, I can compile a list for you to look at. I'm also happy to share with you my PDF collection of all these resources. But I would say for Middle Egyptian, for example, for beginner student in Middle Egyptian, the most frequently used dictionary is Raymond Faulkner's Concise Dictionary of Egyptian. And yeah, I heavily rely on that as a student. Even nowadays, I'm still frequently using that. And of course, the German Wörterbuch is also very frequently consulted by scholars nowadays. And increasingly, we're using a lot of online databases and dictionaries. For example, the Thesaurus Linguae Egyptii. So it's an online Egyptian dictionary, basically based on the Wörterbuch, the dictionary, German dictionary. And it's searchable, so it's extremely convenient, and it's being updated constantly by a team of excellent prominent scholars. Let me see, online dictionaries. Yeah, these are the mostly used dictionaries nowadays. Yeah, there are a lot of there as to online databases are just too many because a lot of universities have online platforms, databases on Egyptian monuments. Sometimes there are textual databases. So for different fields, different subfields, there are different online sources.
Yeah, I think we will take you up on the offer for getting that PDF list of tools. So I think that'll be something really interesting for us to have in our back pocket as well for some continuing research. All right, cool. And the next question is mine. I think you kind of touched on this in the previous question. So it is, could you discuss the benefits and limitations of relying on modern dictionaries and digital resources for deciphering and interpreting ancient Egyptian texts?
Yeah, I think
we always like to talk about the limitations, right? In terms of what you can and can't do with some of these tools. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I definitely acknowledge their utilities for the analysis of ancient textual sources. But at the same time, because they're digital, it's very, you have to talk about costs. It's very expensive to maintain these online sources, and their reliability, accuracy also depend on the competency of the scholars, who are responsible for these online databases and tools. But these scholars, most of them have, full-time jobs. Scholars as, teachers, they have a lot of other responsibilities. They may not be able to fully dedicate to the maintenance of these online digital tools and databases. So inevitably some of these it will become outdated or fall out of use because of the lack of maintenance. And also I feel like the upside is, I guess, these online sources may democratize access to these, I would say, guarded knowledge. So makes it accessible to a lot of people who didn't have the resources or means to study Egyptology at universities or institutions. But I think you would need some kind of background, like solid training, to be able to judge the quality and reliability of these online sources, because some of them are not necessarily produced or maintained by people with solid background in Egyptology.
All right, cool. And speaking of the dictionary that you just mentioned, right? The Faulkner's dictionary, and this is I'm going to rely on both Bobby and Sosa for this piece of the conversation. So Sosa, you got to come off mute now. And here is we want to talk about the particular pieces of the hieroglyphs here. So I'll pass it over to you, Ankh and Sosa, for this piece of the conversation.
Go ahead, Sosa.
Yeah, they were basically trying to get an understanding of how do you, like, you see the glyph with the two people sitting in the three marks underneath, right? And like how would you how would you translate that in that script?
The last word.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the three short strokes, they represent basically plurality, because number 3 is a number of multitude plurality. So it's a marker to indicate a plural term.
And like, so when you read it in totality, do you read it like, in a sense, like the people of the Black land, or?
Just reads. So it will be, the noun will be pronounced Kemet. So Egyptians, the writing system have signs that present sound and signs that present meaning. So in this case, sound, Kemet, is represented by this sign. You can't see my cursor, but this little sign represents the scale of a crocodile. So it's represent the colored black, and the little half spherical
moon under there.
Yeah, that is a feminine marker, T. So Kemet, that's represents, these two signs represent the sound of how to pronounce this word. And they're also the seated men and women, behind these sounds. They represent the meaning of this word. So you see that words with these I guess ideograms, they represent groups of people. And so the same with other words shown here. So the second word here is also pronounced Kemet, but it designates the country, not people. So you can see the signs that present sounds are still the same. So the scale sign represent the sound Kim, and the owl sign in the middle is the sign for M. So actually the word is fully spelled out. So it's KMMT, actually spelled just pronounced as Kemet, but it's actually written KMMT. And the last sign, a circular sign with a crossroads in the middle, represents a town. So it's basically a fortified town with a city wall and a crossroads in the middle. And that is the ideogram, the sign for settlement, cities and towns in Egyptian.
Oh, okay. Quite interesting. Quite interesting. So even so those three, so you would still look at that, and that would just be read as just Kemet.
Yeah. So you see the signs on the words are listed on the left, and the blue letters tell you the pronunciation of these words. So the first word is pronounced Kem. Second word is the third word. They're both pronounced Kemet.
Okay, and this one represents the land and one represents the people of Kemet. Okay. Okay.
So that would be okay. So the bottom line, that wouldn't say the black people of Kemet. It would just say the people of Kemet.
Yeah, it's the people of Kemet.
Yeah, just Kemet.
Oh yeah, well, people told us it was the black people of Kemet. Okay. Yeah, I just want to get straight to
the
it.
black land. I think we were at some older.
I would think it probably best be translated as the people of the black land.
People of the black land.
Land that's black for the soil, correct?
Yeah, from the fertile soil brought by the annual inundation of the Nile.
Right. Makes all sense.
So question, right? Because a point of contention and debate within our community is like, okay, well, where did those initial attestations or right the interpretation that it means the black land or the fertile, reflecting the fertile black soil, is there any sort of evidence where some of those very initial sort of interpretations that it meant that is there anything we can point to specifically to substantiate that particular argument?
I can't think of that off the top of my head, but I can definitely look into this and see if I can find the original Egyptian text that talks about this. Yeah, but a lot of times you see royal statues being depicted with black skin, even though you know that that person is not of Nubian origin or Ethiopian origin. That is typically associated with also the fertile soil. And black is the color of fertility in ancient Egypt.
So when you see
there's symbolic pieces. Okay.
So when you see statues like Mentuhotep, and he's like completely black, that would be like would that be like in his death, divinity?
Yeah, that shows that basically identify him with the god Osiris, who's also often depicted with either black or green skin color. So green is the color of vegetation, black is the color of the fertile Nile soil.
All right, one more question: like the term Kemet for the location of land, is that older than 11th dynasty? Has that name been around for how long? Is the name Kemet for the area?
It's been around for a long time. It's probably already around the Old Kingdom or
Old
even
Kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need to also check on that, but I believe it's quite old term.
It just became more popular later, right?
Yeah. Also, if you look at a satellite image of Egypt, you'll understand why they called their surrounding land the red land. Because initially I thought, oh, desert, are they actually red? Why they're called red land instead of yellow land? Actually, when you look at a satellite image, you understand why they call their surrounding region the red land.
Oh, okay. See, you got to that point there, looking at those satellite imagery, and also the Kim. So my question: would the Kim, would that apply to the fertile land, or would you apply that to the whole country?
I would say for the Egyptians, this Kemet referred to the Nile Valley itself and the Delta area, and the surrounding area. They're called Deshret, literally red land.
Okay, so if you live within the Kim, you're living within the farming area. The Deseret would be the desert, so it's a separation. Okay, so I like that. And so when we're looking at that glyph as an Egyptologist, why would you pick the black land as opposed to the black people? What would be the determining factors there? What goes into the role of understanding the difference? Like why would you choose this over that? Are there any factors in that?
You mean interpreting the word not as the black people of Egypt but people of the black land?
Yes, like what goes into that? Is it a cultural understanding you would have to have, or just by the words? Like what goes into that?
I would say that word is tied to the land, the word for the black land, and also if you see depiction of the Egyptians, how the Egyptians themselves depict themselves, you will see that they pick themselves not with black skin, but reddish brown skin. And they're clearly differentiating themselves from the Nubians of darker skin color. And the Egyptian women are depicted with even lighter skin tone, like yellowish, creamy color, because they spend more time indoors. So the Egyptians, I think they definitely see themselves not as black skinned people.
Mm.
And I would say, but I don't think there's any stigma attached to like darker skin color, because Nubians living in Egypt, they're not afraid of or are not ashamed of depict themselves with black skin color. And also the way these different ethnic groups are depicted in on Egyptian monuments, um, in I would say unofficial representations, like not on temple walls, they actually are, the Egyptians are have a more or less um, tolerant attitude towards these foreign groups. And because royal monuments like temple walls, they serve propagandistic purposes, right? So their depiction of foreign people are heavily influenced by this Egypt-centric worldview. And it's actually, it serves a political purpose, that the pharaoh is fulfilling his role as the protector of Egypt by repelling these foreigners. But at the same time, a large foreign population live in Egypt, throughout Egyptian history. And this is tested by not just Nubians, but Libyans, Asiatics, they live there, and they continue a lot of their own cultural practices, even in Egypt. And the Hyksos dynasty was also established by a group of probably Semitic people from the Syro-Palestinian region.
All right, cool. So that goes into the next phase of the discussion, which is the ethnic identity of the ancient Egyptians. And the next question goes over to Kent.
Okay. Let me show them. Okay. In what ways did ancient Egyptians perceive and establish their cultural identity in contrast to neighboring civilizations?
I would say multiple ways. First of all, I would say the land itself, they see themselves as inhabitants of the Black Land, while other people, I guess because of the environment in which they live, they adopt different lifestyle. Like some of them are nomadic populations instead of sedentary communities. And they also consider themselves to be quite blessed because of the how regular the Nile flood comes every year. And in one of the hymns to the solar god, they actually say that the gods created a Nile in air in the sky for the foreigners. They have a Nile on land, and this Nile in the sky obviously refers to rain. So these foreign countries, they rely on rainfall, but the Egyptians rely on the Nile water. And also mentioned in this hymn to the sun gods that the gods created people of different skin colors and different languages. So I think it's rather a beautiful poem, created by the Egyptians, trying to explain the differences between them and other peoples. And they see themselves as different, but in this particular poem, not necessarily superior to their neighbors. They're just objectively describing the difference between different ethnic groups, their skin color, and different languages they speak. So I think that's very touching to me, at least. And also, I think they also differentiate themselves from their neighbors through their different religious beliefs and funerary practices. And it's of the utmost importance for the Egyptians to be provided with proper traditional Egyptian burial in order to, because the idea of the judgment of the dead looms very big in their head, they had to be lead a moral life on earth in order to, pass the judgment, and otherwise they would probably suffer a second death. And there are elaborate preparations for the afterlife in which they believe in. And their imagination of the afterlife is also heavily influenced by the environment in which they live. And compared to the Mesopotamians, who had a very gloomy view of the netherworld, it's a very dark, hopeless place. People, the ghosts there eat dust, and drink petrified water. But the Egyptians, they see the afterlife as sort of continuation of the life on Earth. And one version of their afterlife is the field of reeds, which is basically a different version, idealized version of the Delta Martian environment.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah, I love the whole narrative about having how the deep ecological connection, right? That connection to the ecology or in their environment sort of helps to shape or form the identity of the ancient Egyptians, right? I think that's a very interesting component.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, also I think they see life as a continuous cycle, like the sun, travels across the sky every day. At the sun dies and gets reborn every single day. So they have this notion of life as a cycle, which is very attractive to me. And there's I think that contributes their very positive view of this whole world.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, Brendan. Also, when you talked about like the divinity tied to the black soil, with the god Osiris, I think that's a very, very natural approach. I think that's deep too, that they would actually recognize the divinity of the black soil based off of how easily things grew out of that black. So that's very natural.
Yeah, and later Greeks also are actually very envious of how easy the life of Egyptian farmers are. So they actually, I think it was probably Herodotus or some other Greek scholar who wrote how the Egyptian farmer basically throw their seeds into the field and drove pigs in them to basically they roam around and then put the seeds into the field. They don't have to do anything else, just wait for the harvest, which is obviously exaggerated, but also it is true to a certain extent.
Right. Awesome. All right, interesting stuff. Let's see here. All right, the next question is yours, Unc. Let's pull that up. Right. Okay. All right, this one is yours, Unc.
Okay. Could you identify and elaborate on the cultural elements that were the most important to the identity and social structure of the ancient Egyptians? Societal structure of the ancient Egyptians.
Cultural elements. I would say religion is very important to the identity and social structure of Egyptians. Within every temple priesthood, there are like hierarchical structures. There's the high priest, and then there are helper priests, and also lower level menial laborers attached to the temple workshops. And there are also field hands tilling the land for temples. The Egyptians took a lot of pride in being able to obtain a religious position as well. And a lot of royal women also serve as the priestesses in cults of not only male gods, but also female goddesses. And the pharaoh, of course, as the intermediary between the divine realm and the earthly realm, had to make sure that the cults of all the gods and goddesses are properly maintained. So that's a very big cultural element central to the identity of the Egyptians. Also, people from different townships are very attached, devoted to their local gods and goddesses. Of course, a lot more incorporated in the Egyptian pantheon through the efforts of political rulers, but different towns are dedicated, in most cases, to one particular local god. Like the town of Heracompolis is the center of worship for the Horus falcon, and the town of Abydos venerated the god of the netherworld, Osiris, and they celebrate religious festival every year in honor of this god, and celebrate his triumph over death, etc. Yeah, definitely. That I would say also literacy is also a very important factor. So the Egyptian scribes are extremely proud of their ability to read and write, and they view their occupation as the best, the most ideal in the world. They actually composed I think Middle Kingdom scribes actually composed this satire of trades. Basically, it compared the scribal profession to all other like menial labor, like farmer, goldsmith, and carpenters, and who had to really suffer a lot and work in very terrible working conditions. While scribes are respected because of their knowledge and wisdom, it's a great way for them to climb up the social ladder. They could live in comfortable conditions and work, in shaded areas or offices. And a lot of scribes also took their scribal kits, include that as part of their burial goods, and they commissioned scribal statues. Even high government officials like vizier, like basically the prime minister, the head of the Egyptian administration, will advertise his literacy and call himself a scribe. In addition to his long list of titles, government officials of different levels, they all took a lot of pride in their able to read and write and even compose.
Wow.
And also, I think relation to the royal family play a significant role in the social hierarchy. So if you're connected in some way to the royal family, then of course you will have access to power, wealth, and influence.
Right. Interesting. All right. So the next one is Sosa. All right. So I'll pass it over to you, Sosa.
Okay. Is there a consensus among Egyptologists regarding the influence of Nubia in the early formation of Egyptian civilization? And if so, how is this relationship characterized in the academic discourse?
I would say there are some more accepted views, but I would not say that all Egyptologists necessarily reached a consensus regarding the influence of Nubia in the formation of Egyptian state. But these two cultures have been in contact since before the formation of the pharaonic state. And some of these contacts are peaceful, like trading. There are Egyptian legumes found in the burials of a lot of these earlier Nubian rulers, and of course Nubian goods, used for the production of Egyptian artifacts. And there are recorded contacts between the Egyptians and Nubians in the Old Kingdom period, but specifically we're talking about the formation of Egyptian state in the first and second dynasty period. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of evidence. There are some rock art found in Nubia, probably documenting some military conflicts between these early Egyptian kings and the local Nubians, who were also ruled by individual rulers. But unfortunately, other than that, we just don't have a lot of contemporary sources on their respective influence on each other, I would say. But there are also a lot of interesting exchange of artistic motifs between these two cultures. Like in a lot of Nubian art, like the crystal incense burner, we found the serech motif, which is ultimately originally from ancient Mesopotamia, and it would travel far across the ancient Near East to reach Egypt, was adopted by the Egyptian pharaohs to decorate the walls of their palaces, to encircle their Horus names. But it was also found on Nubian objects, which is fascinating.
You mentioned in our first meeting that we had that there was a theory. I think you mentioned. I think his name was Bruce Williams, about the Nubian origin. This was his theory about the Nubian origins of ancient Egypt. Can you sort of elaborate on that particular theory that you described and where it sits in terms of the consensus of around modern Egyptology?
Yeah, I have to admit that I haven't done a follow-up research on that theory, but I would say for the minimum that it was a very controversial hypothesis, and there's no strong evidence for that proposal. So he, I think, basically argued that the origin of Egyptian kingship is from Nubia, and I think he probably actually used the Kusto incense burner to support that evidence. So Nubians who live in Lower Nubia during that period of Egyptian history is the Agru people. So we know about their culture mostly from funerary goods, so their burials, and at I think 2 main burial sites. And the burial goods found in these tombs definitely attest to commercial contact between these two cultures and exchange of ideas, probably artistic motifs. But I don't think they tell us much about the relationship between the political elites during this early period of Egyptian history. But we do know that they do have some sort of diplomatic contact in late Old Kingdom period, because in the autobiography of Harkuf, this Egyptian official, he did mention that he brought a donkey caravan to Nubia, and he ran into some of these local rulers who are actually fighting against each other. So we know that Nubia was not politically unified during that period. So that situation, I would say, is comparable to the situation in Egypt before the unification of the country. And he actually did trade with these local rulers. He brought them gifts, and the ruler actually provided him with military escort on his way back.
All right, cool. All right. So the next one is for me. I'm sorry, Unc, you had something to add to that?
I was wondering, did I miss my cue when we was? I think I was supposed to ask about when we was talking about the state formation. What would you say the field would be at, and as far as being a multi-regional development of the Egyptian state, or one single region, in particular Nubia? We hear a lot of times that the state was formed in Nubia and pushed down the Nile towards the Mediterranean. So what is more clear based off of the evidence? Multi-regional or one pocket, one culture moving? And what would you say?
I would say in pre-dynastic period, the political situation in Egypt was similar to what we see in Nubia. In late Old Kingdom, there are multiple political centers with ruling elites based at places like Nagada, Hierakonpolis, probably also Al-Kab or Abydos. And then it was debated whether the elites from Hierakonpolis or Abydos eventually managed to unify Upper Egypt and then push their influence further north. And we have actually found large scale elite burials at multiple of these sites, especially Hierakonpolis. I think a lot of Egyptologists, they're of the opinion that these elites, through both war, violence, and making of alliance with these other elites, they managed to pull their sources together and establish basically a proto-state encompassing the whole of Upper Egypt. And then they managed to defeat those local leaders, rulers in Lower Egypt, and managed to unify Egypt eventually. So most evidence we have from this period are those violent battle scenes on ceremonial palettes. So a lot of them are, of course, found in the context of temples. They're not necessarily historical documents. They are probably reinterpretations of real historical events. So we need to really exercise caution. We're trying to rely on these, and we're trying to reconstruct the history of early Egypt. So they are very suggestive of the use of violence and the unification of Egypt. But because there's no detailed textual record, we cannot, track down the series of events that happened, like famous battles, how many enemies were killed. So nothing could be said with certainty, unfortunately.
Okay.
Right, awesome. Next questions for me. And I think you kind of hinted on the answer, or you kind of hinted on this in some of the previous questions. But I'll go ahead and ask this one. Is how do contemporary Egyptologists approach the study of the phenotypical characteristics of the ancient Egyptian population, and what methodologies are employed in this aspect of research? Right, because I've always seen where okay, well, in terms of like examining like mummies or remains, it's very difficult to analyze soft tissue because of their environment, right? So how do you guys actually determine or analyze the phenotypical pieces, right? In terms of how they look, how the ancient Egyptians looked.
Yeah, so we use a lot of different methods. First of all, we do rely on the artistic depictions created by the Egyptians themselves. And of course, we also need to be aware that these depictions could be influenced by religious ideals, like, how a lot of kings were depicted with black skin, not because of their ethnic identity, but association with fertility, the notion of fertility. And also a lot of the ancient depictions tend to be, they're not like portrait-like depictions, they're more idealized. So especially the Old Kingdom royal statues tend to depict kings as idealized youths that don't seem to age at all. They don't, depict individual facial features of these kings. It's difficult to differentiate between these rulers, if not, without the royal inscriptions. We also rely on the study of mummies, mummified remains, as you mentioned. So fortunately for the New Kingdom periods, we have 2 caches of royal mummies found because of rampant tomb robbing activities at the end of the New Kingdom. The temple priests and later rulers became concerned, and they actually order their officials to go around and visit these royal tombs and collect these earlier royal mummies, rebury them in hidden locations, escape the attention of later tomb robbers. And that is how we have these ancient royal mummies preserved, extremely fortunately. But because of the, I guess, different mummification techniques, some of which are more effective than others, not all of these royal mummies are well preserved. And also, because the Egyptian government nowadays, at least, will require the use of non-destructive, non-invasive methods when you're using analyzing these ancient mummies. So basically, taking soft tissues or dissecting them for retracting of any internal organs would absolutely be banned. So that limits what kind of methods or the technologies that we can actually use to analyze these ancient remains and reconstruct their original appearances. So with, I think, sometimes special permission, these royal mummies could be scanned because they're non-destructive, non-invasive, under the supervision of Egyptologists. And sometimes we could also rely on basically examination, basically with your naked eye, if you get to, examine these mummies up close. And sometimes we have skeletal remains of, like, not royals, but ordinary Egyptians, like workers. And if their mummies remains were relatively well preserved, they could be sometimes analyzed by osteologists to determine, if they suffer any, injury in their life, study their dental records to determine nutrition level and determine their gender, sex. But sometimes if their remains are not very well preserved, it's even difficult to determine their gender in a lot of cases. And in recent years, there's a very interesting mummy. I don't know if you may have heard about this already. There's a mummy with tattoos all over her body.
Really?
So yeah, she's probably a priestess in,
Period. What time period,
I would say New Kingdom periods, but
Kingdom.
I need to look into that. But there are probably online public talks about this because she's been fairly well studied and published. So you should be able to find articles or online lectures on this tattooed mummy with a lot of like religious symbols all over her body. So we actually have known about this practice from like figurines, terracotta figurines, or wall paintings showing tattoos on human body, but having physical remain actual human body with tattoo, that is a very interesting find. Yeah, so we've been relying on these basically for the study of ancient human remains to reconstruct their appearance. And sometimes the Middle Kingdom kings, especially Senusret III and Amenhotep III, their royal statues tend to be more lifelike looking and they show like signs of aging, wrinkles on their forehead, deep folds, on both sides of their noses. And actually, trained art historians are able to distinguish the royal statues of these Middle Kingdom kings because they're very highly trained eyes. And some of the New Kingdom pharaohs also have very prominent facial features, very distinguishable facial features like the Ramesside royal family, like Ramesses II and Seti I. They have a very prominent like aquiline nose that is very characteristic of their family, males in their family. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're at the last question, right?
Awesome.
And
Yeah, I need to.
that one is for, yeah, exactly. And I think we're right on time. And this one's for Kent. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that one up. Pass it over to him. All right.
All right. My camera just died. But so here we go. What connections, if any, have been established between the ancient Egyptian civilization and the modern Egyptian populace in terms of cultural, linguistic, or genetic continuities?
Mhm. Yeah, I think in terms of linguistic continuities, already mentioned the language Coptic, and also there are also remnants of ancient Egyptian language and modern even Arabic. I think I probably mentioned this book called From Pharaoh's Lips. So it actually has a lot of interesting. The author collected a lot of ancient, studied a lot of example of ancient Egyptian vocabulary or expressions in modern Egyptian Arabic. So if you're interested on how ancient Egyptian language influenced the modern Egyptian language, I think that would be a very interesting read. You don't need any training in Egyptian to read that book either.
Awesome. From Pharaoh's Lips. All right, cool.
I think it's, yeah, it's pretty much that title. And in terms of cultural continuity, I think, yeah, again, I will be using the Coptic Church as an example, but also I think if you visit Egypt yourself, nowadays you see a lot of modern Egyptian buildings, public buildings like banks, post office. They incorporate a lot of Egyptian artistic motifs. Yeah, like papyrus columns and images of Pharaoh smiting foreign enemies, on the walls, and even the Egyptian currency, the money, paper money that they have. Yeah, they very proudly incorporate a lot of ancient Egyptian motifs on there, like I think Ramses II riding on a horse-drawn chariot. The statue of Egyptian scribes also were depicted on modern Egyptian money.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
and also in terms of, I guess, population, a lot of Nubian people actually, after the construction of the Aswan High Dam, they were unfortunately displaced, but a lot of them actually moved to Egypt, to southern Egypt, and there are a large number of Nubian population in the Aswan region. There are Nubian villages. They still practice some Egyptian religious practices. And very interestingly, a lot of them kept crocodiles in their houses. Crocodiles actually went extinct in the Nile Valley nowadays. Some of them are still living in the Lake Nasser, this artificial lake formed after the construction of the Aswan High Dam. So the Egyptians worshipped the crocodile god Sobek. He was particularly revered in the Fayum region and also at the site called Komombo. A temple was built to honor him, and also the Egyptians dedicated mummified crocodile to this god, as a sacred animal. There are also a lot of donation stela inscribed with the image of Sobek. But it's amazing to see how these Nubians, they still keep crocodiles in their house as pets. They still mummify crocodiles nowadays. Make souvenirs in the shape of crocodiles.
Interesting. Well, again, right, it just on behalf of our entire group, right, I want to give you a huge thanks again, Dr. Wang, for supporting this conversation. I think, this is going to be a really interesting one for us, once we begin to sort of air this on our YouTube channel, right? It's going to answer a lot of questions, and I'm quite sure it's going to, start some additional conversations and debates around what we've just discussed tonight. You have any closing words? You want to close us out, brother?
Well, I appreciate your expertise in this expert conversation that you have presented to our community. I appreciate you. The answers were very nuanced at times, and I just appreciate the way you showed how Egyptologists get to their answers. I think this is important for building a strong foundation so that we can actually understand that particular African civilization. And so I just appreciate you, and you know, thanks for being a healthy resource for us.
I'm also very honored for being invited, and I can't claim to be an expert on every question that you ask, but there are very thought-provoking questions. I also am very delighted to have this conversation with the group, and it's always a pleasure to share what I'm passionate about with the wider community. So.
Before I forget, right? We talked about, you know, maybe you recommending some very I guess you would say fundamental or foundational sort of references for lay people to begin sort of studies in ancient Egypt in the cultures. All right. Could you maybe just refer us to just a few of your favorite sources for early studiers?
You mean general reading on Egyptian history or
Yes. Yep. Yep, just general reading, right? You know, learning more about ancient Egyptian culture for lay people such as ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. So I would say the Oxford Book of Egyptian History. So I think I may have it here. Mhm. Well, sure, no, I don't. But this Oxford Handbook of Ancient Egypt is edited by Ian Shaw. It's a very nice volume. Gives you a nice introduction to different periods of Egyptian history, and all different chapters are written by experts, you know, in that field. So, and it's very accessible, easy to read. It also has a chronology at the back. And this is actually the standard textbook used by a lot of Egyptology, first-year Egyptology students. And if you wanted to learn more about the textual records left behind by the Egyptians, you can read Miriam Lichtheim's translation of selected Egyptian texts in her 3-volume publication. So the first volume was on literature from so it's called Ancient Egyptian Literature. The first volume is dedicated to the Old and Middle Kingdom period. The second volume is on the New Kingdom period. The last volume is on the late period and even later texts. So it provides a selection of different genres of Egyptian texts, and they're translated into English using very understandable, easy to access language. So there's also, if you wanted to buy just one book, there's the volume edited by William Kelly Simpson, also called Ancient Egyptian Literature or Literature of Ancient Egypt. Also send you the list afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any closing words from anybody else before we close out the Zoom session?
No, thanks for coming and Happy New Year, and you know, enjoy your dinner.
Definitely
Oh,
will.
yeah, man, I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you spending time with us this evening.
Right. Thank you.
I'm going to log off. Goodbye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, man, we can hit this live stream, man, have this discussion. It was a great interview, man. Hope y'all enjoyed it, man. And with that, man, we out.